Hey everyone, how's it going? Forrest here, again with another installment of my complete analysis of all of Bach's chorale harmonizations. I'm not going to say 389 anymore because I've been doing some research and I found that there are actually quite a bit more than 389 chorale harmonizations. However, I've been introducing my videos with that number because my anthology I assumed to be complete. However, it's not quite there. It's almost there, but it's not quite there. Also, my anthology does not seem to organize the chorales in any particular way. It has published them in whatever order they wanted to. I can't seem to find any pattern, and I've just been uploading them from how they occur in the book. So that could be any number, and you'll notice that the chorales that I've analyzed have been somewhat jumbled. I might be analyzing one of Bach's early works, or early vocal works that is. I might be analyzing one of Bach's latest, or the later vocal works. It ultimately depends on how it's conveyed in the book or in the anthology, but that's going to be changing from moving forward because I cannot continue to organize the chorales and keep track of everything by jumping around so much. I ran into an issue today where I saw one harmonization of the same melody that I'm going to be analyzing for today. I saw that I had actually analyzed the exact same harmonization twice, and I'm like, I must have made a mistake. I must have accidentally picked the same harmonization twice, and the book can't be wrong. But my anthology does in fact have two versions of the exact same harmonization in them. No difference in key, no difference in anything. They are the exact same harmonization, and I really don't want to go through the entire book and vet each individual instance of the chorale. I don't know if it's going to happen again, so I found another source. I found a more complete source that has organized everything by BWV numbers, and that's how I'm going to upload from now on. So I'm going to be uploading in order of BWV, filling in the gaps that I haven't already analyzed. So up until this point, this is the last chorale that I'm going to be analyzing in the order of the version that I've been using, my anthology and the version that it is associated with, and I'm going to be analyzing them in the order in which they occur in the BWV categorization system. So this is Freu dich sehr, O meine Seele, which translates to Rejoice greatly, O my soul. This is the fourth time we've seen a harmonization of this melody, but two of the harmonizations were exactly the same. No differences between them, so apologies. If you want to go back and watch those videos, they are episodes 29 and 67, and it's interesting going back and watching my analysis. They're very similar analyses, and I pretty much get the same result for both of them, which is good because I'm staying consistent, but it's still kind of suspect the fact that I had to analyze both. And because I'm analyzing these on a daily basis, I'm not remembering chorales that are 40 episodes back by name. Or at least by by the exact harmonic content. The titles are somewhat familiar to me, but the content in its entirety is much about it is lost. I'm looking for long-term trends and things that are common between the different chorales that are analyzed over a longer period of time. So let's start with our analysis. So we start on A major, we end on A major. There are 3 sharps in the key signature. We're in the key of A major for sure. However, our first cadence, I hear it as a perfect authentic cadence in the key of E major. So we're looking for a point to analyze. I'm just going to move my notes over here so that they're a little easier to see. So we're starting off with a 1 chord, as we often do. Not always, but often. We then have G sharp, E, E, and B. That is an E major triad in first inversion, which is 5-6. It's our dominant. We then have A, E, A, and C sharp, another tonic triad in root position, A major. We then have an anticipation in the tenor. We then have B, F sharp, D sharp, and B. But before we get to that chord, I reckon we've already modulated to the key of E major. This A major chord now in the key of E major is 4, and we can call this B major triad here, that's in root position, our 5 chord, because B is now our new dominant. We then have C sharp, E, and A. 5 often via a deceptive progression, especially in anticipation for a cadence, will go to some sort of 6 on the bass, and it's either 6 or maybe more commonly 4-6. And then we get a passing chord here, D sharp, B, F sharp, and A. That's a B7 triad over D sharp, which is a passing 5-6 chord. Usually when Bach is linking a 4 chord up to a 1 chord, which is the next chord we have here, E, B. This F sharp is an accented non-chord tone, E and G sharp, which is our tonic triad. He seldom does it via just a progression of 4-6 to 1. We often get a passing dominant. At minimum, we get the voice that's linking the 6 and the 1 of the scale. We usually get a passing 7th there as a minimum. Not always, but virtually always. Alright, then we have A, C sharp, E, and F sharp. That is an F sharp minor 7 chord over A, which is 2-6-5, and we know that Bach loves his 2-6-5s. We then have B, B, D sharp, and F. It's just a root position B major triad, so that's our 5. Passing tone in the tenor. And then we have E, G sharp, B, and E, which is our tonic triad in E major, which is 1. Pretty straightforward cadential formula here. So our next cadence is a perfect authentic cadence in the key of A major. I'm going to go ahead and say that we've already modulated here and say that this is our common chord, which is, I wrote out the letter E. I was writing out what I was thinking in my head. This is an E major chord, but this is actually a 5 chord now in the key of A. We then have F sharp, C sharp, F sharp, and A. That's an F sharp minor triad in root position, which is a 6 chord. We then have G sharp, B, F sharp, and B. This F sharp is probably an accented non-chord tone, and this is actually E, G sharp, and B, which is an E major triad in first inversion, which is 5-6. Again, with this idea of 6-7-1, connecting the bass. The 7 of the scale here is similar to how we have this 4-6 chord here, 5-6-1, 6-5-6, and then probably 1 here. A, B, E, and C sharp. This B being an accented non-chord tone. This is a 1 chord. Then we have B, A, B, and D. This A again being an accented non-chord tone in the tenor. We have B, G sharp, B, and D, which is a G sharp diminished triad in first inversion. That's 7-6. And then we have C sharp, E, B, and C sharp. Now this is kind of a hard chord to analyze because I think that this B is an accented non-chord tone because I usually expect 7-6 in Bach's music especially to go to 1. And C sharp, E, A, and C sharp is a 1-6 chord, but we have a problem. We have a D major, we have a D natural here, and this D natural kind of confuses things because D, E, A, and C sharp, that's not a normal triad. So I really don't know what's going on here. I think it's mostly just counterpoint, and really what's being implied here is some sort of 1 chord. You could technically call this a 3 chord, a 3-7 more specifically, and this could be kind of a deceptive progression because 3 is a substitute for 1, but we would expect 1, so it would sound different to us. But in such close proximity to the cadence, 3 is usually not a chord that's used. So this D right here, definitely confusing, definitely makes this analysis not super clear. We then have E, E, A, and D, and I reckon this A is the 4-3 suspension over the bass. And then we have, so this is basically just a 5 chord with a suspension above it, and then here we have a passing 7th. It kind of turns the chord into a 7 on this beat. Actually doesn't kind of do it, it exactly does it. We have E, D, G sharp, and B before we cadence on 1. A major, A, C sharp, E, and A. But yeah, this passing D right here interrupts the suspension, the 7-6 suspension over the bass. Very interesting, and it really doesn't, the chord isn't really analyzable, so it's mainly just counterpoint. But the spirit of the 1 chord is definitely here. Alright, moving ahead to the next cadence, we have a half cadence in the key of B minor, because we cadence on F sharp major here. And then we go immediately to another tonic triad, which is just a 1 chord, right? I don't really like using 7 as a common chord, but Bach tends to do it with somewhat frequency, so I'm starting to get more comfortable analyzing it that way. We then have B, B, A, and D, and B, B, A, and D. I reckon this G chord right here is actually where we're headed. So G, B, B, and D. This would be a G major triad, which would be 6 in the key of B minor, more specifically 6-6, because we have B in the bass. And then we have C sharp. This is kind of a deceptive progression because we would expect 7 to go to 1, but 7's going to 6, or 7's going to 3. We would expect it to go to something other than 6, which is why it's deceptive. We then have C sharp, B, G, and E, and we can call that a 2 chord. However, in the same way that we tend to link sort of like an ascending 4 or 6 chord, I think it's actually this A sharp that's our chord tone. It's A sharp, C sharp, E, and G, which is a 7-6-5 chord. Sorry, I didn't mean to put that in parentheses. What I was thinking was you could also hear this as a 2-7 chord, like so. Depending on how you hear it, you could hear it as 2-7, or you could hear it as 7-6-5, but I think it's a 6-5 chord because it's linking another tonic triad. It's going up, tonic triad, going up to a tonic triad, and I think that this is just a formula that Bach uses. So we have D, B, F sharp, and D. That's B minor over D, which is our tonic triad like I was talking about. Then we have some passing tones in the inner voice, or sorry, not in the inner voices, in the bass and in the alto. And then E, B, G sharp, and D. That would be a byproduct of melodic minor, right? We have a melodic minor fragment, F sharp, G sharp, A sharp, B in the alto. So this is definitely a 4 chord, but it's made into a dominant 7 via the G sharp. Otherwise it would be a minor triad as a bass, or as a foundation or its triadic structure would be minor, and adding the 7th would make it a minor 7th rather than a major triad with a minor 7th. We then have F sharp, A sharp, and C sharp. That's our 5 chord, F sharp major in root position. We then have G natural. We kind of have what looks to be like a Phrygian half cadence here. G, the counterpoint makes it kind of difficult to see, but we have G, F, B, and B, and that kind of looks like a 2 chord. However, we could also make the argument that it's 4-6, right? And this F is actually an accented non-chord tone. We could have E, G, B, and B. So I think that that's actually what's being implied here is a 4-6 before we eventually cadence back on 5. Phrygian. The Phrygian half cadence, of course, is when we have 4 in first inversion going back down to 5. That half step movement is indicative of like a Phrygian mode, right? Because we have the half step between the tonic and the second scale degree. All right, moving ahead, we have another half cadence, but we're moving back to the key of A major. So let's see what happens. There's really, it immediately goes back to A major, and it doesn't sound like we're in B minor anymore. It sounds like after this phrase, we directly modulate to the key of A major. That's what it sounds like to me. I guess if you wanted to, you can call this A major chord 7, and then you could link it via a common chord, the same way that we linked A to B here via this common chord. But we sounded like we were in the key of A major a little bit afterwards. We had no reason to believe that we weren't. Whereas A major being played right after a phrase that ends in B minor, no real commonality or expected succession between the two phrases. So we have C sharp, A, E, and E. That's a A major triad in first inversion. Got some passing tones. And then we have A, C sharp, A, and E. That's just a root position tonic triad, or at least I'd be tempted to call it a root position tonic triad because that's what it is on the downbeat, but this G natural right here is implying other things. I think that that's making this sound more like 5 of 4, as the tonic triad is also the dominant of the subdominant. In that case, we would expect this 5 of 4 chord to go to 4. We have D, C, F sharp, and F sharp, which is kind of interesting. It's a fifthless 4 chord, more specifically a 4-7. But if you hear this C as an accented non-chord tone, you might hear this as B minor, B, D, F sharp, and F sharp, which would be 2, 6, 5, or sorry, just 2, 6. Depending on how you hear it, it would be either a deceptive progression, or we're hearing this as a 4, 7. Either way, the chords are very similar to one another. We then have E, B, G sharp, and E. That's our dominant triad, E major in root position. Anticipation in the tenor. Lots of anticipation tones in the texture. Then we have F sharp, C, A, and D. Another 4 chord that has a 7th in it, right? This would be D major 7 over F sharp, which would be 4, 6, 5. And then we have some passing tones. We have a passing tone, a neighbor tone, and then we leap down to E as well. So that turns this into E, B, E, and D, or sorry, G sharp, B, E, and D. That's a passing E7 chord over G sharp, so 5, 6, 5. And then we cadence on A, C sharp, E, and C sharp. That's just our tonic triad. So the progression is working the way that we would expect. The same way that we had a 4, 6, 5 going to 5, 6, 5 going to 1 here. Or sorry, just a 4, 6 here. We then have secondary leading tone, which would be D sharp, A, F sharp, and C, which is kind of like a passing A, D sharp, F, passing 4, 3 chord. And it's not half diminished, it's fully diminished, before we cadence on 5. This would be like 4, 4, 3 of 5, going to 5, but it's very brief because all that's happening here is the D sharp and the F sharp lining up on the and of 2, which you briefly hear that dominant, or that diminished sound with the leading tone and the tenor suspended over that bass going down to E, which is why I don't think we've modulated. This is the only chromaticism we've really seen in the entire phrase that hints at the idea of E. Maybe this idea of G might hint at E minor, but it's not consistent enough, and it's more so used to contextualize the D afterwards, right? Because the bass goes the way that you expect it to. Okay, moving ahead, we have an imperfect authentic cadence in the key of F sharp minor, which is the relative minor to the key that we're in. We have A, E, A, and C sharp, where you expect 5 to go to 1. But I don't think the modulation really happens until around here, because this is where we start to see the E sharps that contextualize the melody as sounding like more in the key of F sharp minor. So we have a 1 chord here, passing tone in the melody. We have A, E, D, and E. However, I think this A is an accented non-chord tone, and it's really G sharp, E, B, and E, which is a 5, 6, 5 chord, E major over G sharp, just like how we started. And then we have F sharp, A, and D. And depending on how you hear this, you might be tempted to call this a 4 chord. However, this B, D, F sharp, and A might be 2, 6, this would be either a 4, 6 or 2, 4, 3, depending on how you hear it. I think it's a 4, 6 chord. 5, 6 to 4, 6 is pretty common. 2, 4, 3. Regardless, I think this is our modulation to the key of F sharp minor as 4, 6, which is our D chord. It would be 6, 6 in the key of F sharp minor, kind of like how we have, oh, never mind. I mistook it. I mistook our modulation, our pivot chord to the key of B minor as another 6 here. No, this is a 7 chord. So this is the first time we're seeing 6 as a pivot chord. It would be either 6 major, or in the key of, it would be a 4, sorry, this wouldn't even be diminished. I don't know why I wrote that as diminished. I think it's because I'm thinking in terms of minor already here, because I knew that was our modulation point. You might call this 4, 4, 3, but I think it's more likely that this is 6, 6. We have E sharp, C sharp, G, and C sharp. That's a C sharp major triad over E sharp, which is 5, 6, passing 7th in the melody. Then we have F sharp, C sharp, G, and A. Another really interesting situation akin to what's going on right here, where we have this anticipation going on, but we have an interruption here that keeps us from fully realizing where this 5, 6 chord is going. I think really what's happening here is that we have a tonic triad that doesn't want to get, or it's not supposed to be realized until, I marked the wrong chord tone here. it's actually here. That's the accented non-chord tone. F sharp, C sharp, and A would be our tonic triad, F sharp minor. But the E right here gets in the way of us fully realizing it. Here we have F sharp, like a passing minor 7 chord here, because we have a passing 7th in the bass. But really it's just counterpoint that muddies the texture, the same way that this D interrupts the texture here. But really I think the tonic triad is being implied. We have D, D, F sharp, and B. That is B minor over D, which is 4/6. And then we get a chord tone here, but we also get G sharp, D, D, and B. And like I said, when we're linking the idea of the tonic triad from 4/6 going up, we usually get a passing 7th linking the 6 and the 1. Or in this case, we're linking the 1 and the 3. But this is definitely a passing 7 chord. In this case, it's actually 7/6/4, right? G sharp diminished over D, which would be 7/6/4. And then we have A, F sharp, A, and C sharp, which is our tonic triad, F sharp minor, passing tone in the bass. And then we have C sharp, E sharp, G, and C with the 4/3 suspension over the bass. That's just a 5 chord before we cadence on our tonic triad, F sharp minor. Alright, moving into the last phrase, we end on what we would expect, a perfect authentic cadence in the key of the tonic, A major, but where we modulate might be up to some debate. Here we have A sharp again, so I'm not inclined that we've modulated yet until the A sharps disappear, so I'm thinking it might happen in and around the beginning of this measure right here, just from sight, but we'll see. F sharp, A sharp, C. So now that we turn the F sharp triad into or the F sharp minor triad into F sharp major, we know that it's now functioning as a dominant, so 5 of 4, similar to how we have 5 of 4 going on here in the key of A major. So it's not the first time we've seen it. And then we have a D here. Let's see if that changes anything. D, F sharp, and A sharp. So that would be like a 3 chord, or like an augmented. Wait, is that right? D, F sharp, A sharp. That would be like a D augmented triad, like a 6 augmented. Am I thinking about that correctly? Yeah, that's not what we would expect, because we're in the key, we're thinking in terms of B minor here. But before we get B minor, we actually don't get B minor until here. This is our 4 chord. We actually get some interesting interruption of the resolution. We have E, B, G sharp, B, and E, which is an E major triad over G sharp. So we get 4, in the key of F sharp minor, we get, let's see, in the key of F sharp minor, we get like a 7/6 chord right here, which some people call 5 of 3 because it's also the dominant of the mediant in a minor key. And then we get, this is really just a byproduct of B melodic minor actually. And you know what? Now that I'm seeing this, I don't think we're actually in the key of F sharp minor anymore. I think instead we're actually in the key of B minor here, and I think this is kind of like a direct modulation using the juxtaposition of the two qualities of triads to better contextualize what's going on here. At least it makes sense to think about it that way. So if we think about this in the key of B minor instead of F sharp minor, this would just be a 5 chord in root position with a passing tone in the melody, right? Because F sharp major is our dominant. And then we have E, G sharp, B, and E. That is our E major triad, which would be 4/6, right? We're used to seeing 4/6 as a major chord because of melodic minor, the G sharp being the melodic minor. Then we have A sharp, C sharp, F sharp, and E, which is our passing 5 chord, more specifically 5/6/5, as it's F sharp, a 7 over A sharp. And then we get B, D, F sharp, and B, which is our tonic triad in root position. That makes a lot more sense to me, I think. And we can go ahead and call that 2 in the key of, not B minor, apologies, in the key of A major. Alright, but interestingly enough, we kind of have the same conundrum here where we take a chord, and you might be tempted to call this 2, which I am going to call 2 because it's our common chord that we have, but we have G sharp B D here as well. So the same reason why I've called chords that appear to be 2 chords, we actually don't have an example in this chorale. That's really fascinating. If you've watched some of my other videos, and you could probably pick one, and chances are I'll be talking about it at some point in the video, something that looks like a 2 chord that links together a chord with a tonic on the other end. It's usually a 7/6 chord with a accented non-chord tone. It's really this G sharp that's the note of interest. That's how I've been analyzing them up until this point. But this F sharp is undoubtedly where the 5 wants to go, right? The 5 wants to go, or it's not the F sharp, it's the B. The 5 chord wants to go to 1, which is now being recontextualized as 2, but we have the same dilemma here. We have the linking of the 6 and the 1 with the passing 7th, and that sounds like a diminished triad to me. So the fact that we have a tonicization or a pivot chord of the 2, which is then quickly heard as the 7 after the fact, I think that's really interesting. We have C sharp, E, A, and C sharp. That is a tonic triad in... It's the exact same thing. It's like we're expecting the 1 chord to follow, which we have here, and 2 going to 1 is not a very strong progression. I guess it's possible to say that we have a passing 7 chord here, but I just don't... 2 going to 7, they share 2 notes in common. It's just not as strong of a progression as 4 going to 7 or 2 going to 5. When you mix the 2 together, it's not as effective. It's the least effective permutation in tonal terms. But we have a tonic triad nonetheless in first inversion here. C sharp, E, A natural, and C. With this D in the bass as well that leaps down a 7th. That's also interesting. E, E, G sharp, and B. Our dominant E major triad in root position, passing 7th in the bass. C sharp, E, A, and C sharp. That is our tonic triad again, but this time it's in root. It's in first inversion again, just the bass is an octave below. And very interestingly, we have the same dilemma here where I would be tempted to say that we get a root position version of the chord on 4 and, but we get D and A at the same time, right? We get D in the melody and A in the bass, which conflicts me calling this a 5/3. It would only be 5/3 for a 16th note worth of meter, and yeah, I don't know. It's just interesting that we see the D and the A conflict again, making the analysis somewhat muddy. Really, it's just counterpoint that does that. So. Anywho, we have E, E, A, and D. This A is an accented non-chord tone. It's the G that we're looking for here, more specifically the G sharp. It's a root position 5 chord, a delayed 7th in the tenor before we cadence on, just in time for me to break my pencil lead, a tonic triad in root position, A major. So all in all, this was a really fascinating chorale for a couple of reasons. One, the occurrence of that D and A happening at the same time is really fascinating. That's why I love analysis. Pretty much no one would hear that. It's the page that reveals that that's happening. Modulation via 7th is pretty cool. I guess you could have said that it happened here too, over this G major chord, depending on how you hear it. I don't know. I think it's more likely that we'd modulate over this rather than a secondary dominant. I really only use secondary dominants as a modulation point if I really need to. You'll find that I'll use a pivot chord that is diatonic to both keys before I use a secondary dominant, but sometimes it happens. And probably the most interesting point is where we modulate back to the key of A major. We could call this 1, and we could modulate again via a 7. We can call this 7 and have it turn back into 1, kind of like completing this, but it just doesn't sound like that's where the modulation happens. It sounds like we're in the key of A major starting here. That's just what it sounds like to me. So I was analyzing this all in the key of F sharp minor before, but it just did not look as elegant as just saying we were in the key of B minor. I think we definitely are in the key of B minor here, especially with the juxtaposition of the two triads. Even though mid-phrase modulations or introducing a new key and ending the phrase in a new key is relatively uncommon in the chorales. It does happen. This is not the first time it's happened in the chorales that I've looked at. So all in all, really fascinating chorale for that reason. The harmony was pretty straightforward, except for a couple of the sections that didn't allow the resolution of the suspension to occur exactly where you would expect due to some type of interruption. But it was a fun chorale to analyze nonetheless. And just a reminder that I'm going to be analyzing the chorales in order of the BWV numbers now, just because it's easier for me to keep track of, and I don't think my volume that I've been following so far is to be trusted, which is why I've been sourcing my sheet music from other more reputable sources since then, and just using the volume as a roadmap rather than as an exact text for my analyses. The vetting process is just so much easier that way, as opposed to having to cross-reference 2 or sometimes even 3 times. That being said, I look forward to my daily analysis tomorrow. Thank you so much for watching the video. Thank you so much for supporting the channel, and I hope you take care.